The Newsfeed PM continues. Thanks for staying on. Our Cape Town reporter Nasiphi Same has been looking at this story of Joshlin Smith from the beginning. She joins us now to unpack that moment, of course, in the trial that she has been watching up until this point. Nasiphi, good to have you, and thank you very much for your intervention this afternoon. You have, as I mentioned, been covering this trial from the beginning. Can you take us back to the very first day when the news broke and, of course, later on people would have been arrested? What was the first day of the appearance in court?
Well, that was the 3rd of March, more than 9 weeks ago, when we had the first day of trial. And I remember it vividly. There were a number of people outside waiting to make their way inside the White City Multipurpose Center, declared as the Western Cape High Court for the duration of the trial. And a lot of expectations and silence, which was extremely heavy. But the first to testify that day was Constable Yanga Gongota, who responded, or was the first responder that evening of the 19th of February, 2024. He was accompanied by his partner, Constable Luzuko Kobese. They were the ones that responded that evening to a missing child complaint, which they then met the mother of Joshlin Smith, who was 6 years old at the time, and they relayed to the court, or specifically Constable Yanga Gongota, relayed to the court his version of events that evening, which was just before load shedding. And he detailed to the court how they worked as police officers, going beyond the call of duty and trying to locate this little girl. But at the time, from the information they received from the mother, the question, or rather the people that they were looking for that evening, was the boyfriend to the mother, who is accused one in this trial, which is Jacqueline Apollos and Joshlin Smith. And they were looking for those two people, the adult and the little girl. And he detailed when they eventually found the boyfriend, it was as if there was a sigh of relief from the mother, who seemed to be more concerned about the partner and having found him more than the missing child. And this was a testimony, or a line rather, that was used by many that testified and were called by the state, who many highlighted the demeanor of the mother and the lack of care that, from the outside in, looking and saying that the mother did not seem like somebody who was concerned about her missing daughter. So we had a number of people that particular day, and an opportunity as well to speak not only to the paternal grandmother, Rita Yon, but also the father, Josh MK, who at the time was still saying that he remains hopeful that his daughter was out there, and hoping that the legal proceedings will be able to fill in the gaps as to what exactly happened to his daughter and where she was. And 15 months later, we're sitting here, the 3 people now convicted, and missing person inquiry still pending, and no Joshlin.
Yeah, 15 months later, as you put it. That first day, of course, and even 15 months later, this whole drama is not only playing out in the courtroom, but it is also playing out in the community. I mean, the community of Saldanha Bay would have been now in the courtroom this past week. The sight, the feel, their energy, what were they like? I mean, if you look at the tension, I suppose, that would have existed on the first day to what they were last week Friday.
I would say that, the atmosphere was palpable. It was a community of Saldanha, and those that traveled from other parts of the Western Cape to support this very community who was torn relieved and torn, bittersweet moment that we are getting to a judgment day, and they still, linger, or rather the questions still linger as to where Joshlin was, which was a phrase that we heard from the initial stages when the community had rallied looking for Joshlin, even when the court went on an inspection in Loko in the Tsitsiratseki area, which falls under the Middle Coast community. The question was, where was Joshlin? And as much as many celebrated the verdict, which saw the conviction of Jacqueline Apollos, Stefano van Rijn, and the mother, Kelly Smith, of human trafficking and kidnapping charges, many still ask themselves where the little girl could be. So as much as many celebrated the legal milestone in the conviction, it's still a very open, old, fresh wound for those community members who, because of the missing girl, have banded together and became one, speaking in one voice, feeling the same pain, which was they're now missing one daughter from the community of Saldanha.
You had walked the street of Saldanha. It's a small town. You've managed to get a sense of how the community would have been affected by this trial. Were there any stories in your interactions with the local residents?
Oh, there was a lot of stories. We first started and covered this particular story of missing Joshlin, if I'm correct, on the 27th of February 2024. And at the time, you don't realize the magnitude of the story because you're focused on getting the facts and hopefully playing your part in trying to get this little girl's face on TV. So that, people can now know that there's a missing child in Saldanha and possibly assist wherever they are in the country. But on that particular day, in hoping to speak to the mother and boyfriend, we were unable to, as she at the time was having a Facebook meeting, Facebook Live interview rather, and we were unable to speak to her. But one of the people that we spoke to was a lady called Natanya Kekana, who to us relayed her pain. At the time, it was 15 years as a family of the Kekana who had lost their child more than 15 years ago. And they were saying that they feel compelled to form part of the search, because they themselves, 15 years later, they are still, hoping to hear where their little daughter was. And till this day, she is yet to be found. So those are the kind of stories that, we would stumble upon, and conversations that we had at the time. But it was a very emotional time, especially leading up to the arrest of the 4 individuals that were charged for human trafficking and kidnapping charges. But that community, and also listening to the Kekana family that we interviewed on the 27th, was a community that now had to relive what happened 15 years ago, where another daughter went missing in that community and still unaccounted for. So, the pain of Joshlin just scratched those very old, deep wounds, just to remind them once again of their particular pain. However, that didn't stop that community. They still continued to band together and form part and formalize themselves and search for Joshlin Smith, working hand in hand with officials, of course.
I'm sure for you, Nasiphi, there would have been, and I suppose for many who would have been in that courtroom, some unexpected revelations, twists and turns in the story as it was developing. What comes up for you?
I think what comes up for me is the testimonies. The state, when they were closing their case, they said that the testimonies, or rather the people that were called to testify, about 35 of them, and of course the key state witness, Laurentia Lombard, they all had a golden thread weaving from one person to the next, and giving weight to the next testimony. And I think what stood out for me, for example, maybe in the first week, was the inspection in local, where the court officials, together with the accused, went to the Tsitsiratseki area in Middle Post. First stop was the home that Joshlin lived and played with her siblings and her friends, and shared with her mother, Kelly Smith, and her boyfriend, Jacqueline Apollos. So that was the house where everything seemed to go down, if one would put it that way, where the plan was communicated, and the likes. So that's where we started. These three individuals returning to this community in handcuffs, under heavy police guard, and with court officials standing outside what they used to call home, and now in the middle of a trial, looking into the disappearance of Joshlin, and just looking at the three accused, how they maneuvered. However, before we arrived at the house, the court officials and the convoy of police officers was greeted by a very, very angry community who chanted, "Where's Joshlin?" knowing that the mother and her two co-accused would be coming to the area of Middle Post that afternoon. They decided to be the first ones to greet us, and showing how visibly angry and broken they were due to the disappearance of Joshlin, and how, the three accused interacted with their legal representatives and between themselves. And at some point, we managed to see, when we went to the street where police officers parked, before getting out to make their way to Kelly Smith, the 19th of February. That is another place where we went, and the community saying that, Kelly's dog was now roaming around because the house is now locked, or has been locked for over a year. And how Kelly got excited at some point when she saw her dog. I think she said the dog's name was Lady. And it was quite interesting to see the emotions that she displayed, from being subdued to being excited, seeing the dog, to when she was now leaving back for court, and the police officers assisting her in the van, the slamming of the van itself and closing it, and those visuals of her sitting alone in the back of a police van, covering her face, and at some point becoming extremely emotional. And it was actually quite interesting to see the wave of emotions that she displayed in that, perhaps I'd say, an hour we were there in that community. And the reason for that particular inspection was for the court to get a clearer understanding of the community of Middle Post, so Tsitsiratseki. We heard the various testimonies of the police officers saying that they went to a particular house, they parked at a particular street, this is where they walked, this was the home of Joshlin that she shared with her mother and boyfriend and siblings. So that was the basis of that, to see the particular points that people were testifying, so that we can visualize as we sit in court how that community looked like. So that was something that stood out for me. And I think the testimonies as well, that then, saw the explosive, detailed, and grim plan, that saw, or rather that had the detailed plan of Joshlin's fate, and ultimately her now still remaining missing.
Ultimately, though, because of time, Nasiphi, we'll talk about this. There is still, of course, not proper closure, because it's still not known where Joshlin Smith is. What happens now? What is the sense in the community?
What happens now is the community still remains hopeful. They celebrate the legal milestone, or the conclusion of the legal leg, as much as they see the end in the horizon. We know that on the 9th of May, next week Friday, or this coming Friday rather, the three accused will be appearing again at the Western Cape High Court, sitting in Cape Town this time around. And from what Judge Erasmus said on the 2nd of May was that they now need to consult with their legal representatives as to what the way forward is regarding their case. After that, the matter will be postponed and will return to Saldanha, the White City Multipurpose Center, where we can then expect sentencing. So that is where we are currently regarding this particular trial.
How did this affect you? I mean, as a journalist covering this story, I'm sure it would have been an emotional roller coaster even for yourself.
I suppose one would say it was an emotional roller coaster. And I think for the longest time, one tried to remove the emotions in themselves from the testimonies and from what they were hearing even outside and the conversations that one was having with people that live in Saldanha. So I think it's still too early to tell, as the trial has not concluded yet. One still needs to go back and evaluate perhaps how the trial affected me. But I do think that just watching the community and how broken they were, even though they were celebrating, I think in that moment, their tears and emotions did perhaps tug me a little bit.
Nasiphi, congratulations on the work that you have put in, and of course the time, the hours. I know it's been grueling, and being able to watch that, and you're continuing to watch it again to be able to wrap it all up. That's Nasiphi Same, our reporter, who's been watching that matter of Joshlin Smith Wrap.